The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, Conda, power. I love the power. I love the power.
Hi everyone and welcome to the 67th and final Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast for season 2015. I'm your host Macca 19 and joining me as co-host once again is the lovely Portia.
G'day, Macca. Really, 67? That's an odd number to finish on. I don't know.
It is an odd number.
That better.
Yeah, we did 69 last year, so a couple less this year. So.
It's a prime number too, isn't it?
Is it?
No, it's not. That's wrong. I'm an idiot. No, it's not. Hang on. I don't know. I'm lost. I think it's prime. Might be prime. I'm going to shut up now. G'day, Macca.
That's right. I can edit all this out. Not really. I'm still going to leave it in, but, you know.
Yeah, I would.
That's it. Now, Rick couldn't join us once again, so back on the podcast for the final episode is drafter expert and former AFL scout, Mission Possible.
Hello, Macca. Hello, Portia.
How are you?
G'day.
Yeah, pretty good.
That's
Totally
fine.
unorganised like normal, but yeah, I'm good.
Oh, yeah. Hey. Can I just jump in with a podcast brag right now? How good would we do as far as identifying players that we might potentially draft? I mean, this is the best year I think we've had in probably a decade.
Yeah, well, yeah, probably. I mean, pretty much everyone that we spoke about got picked, except for maybe one or two players, but yeah, we did pretty well. Much better than last year, where I think nobody that we actually spoke about we drafted at all. So that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think we could have ever nailed last year's. God.
I think you got Darcy Byrne-Jones though, didn't you? Was that last year?
That was the year before.
That was the year before, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, last year was all the GOS rejects that we picked up.
All right, well, let's get straight into it. So I guess the first question is, who watched the new and arguably improved draft night, and what were your thoughts on the draft night as a whole?
I didn't watch it. I followed it on the net, so Mission Possible might have a bit more to say there.
I'm the same as Portia.
My goodness.
I was at a school presentation night for the first watching it on my phone and going, oh my God, this is slow. And I got through to about pick 45. I was like, oh, can they stretch this out any longer if they try? It was good. I've criticised it previous years that it's gone way too quick, that you didn't have a chance to follow what was going on. And this year, I think they just took it to the other extreme, where it was like, can you just hurry up and pick someone?
Yeah. Well, I guess in previous years, it's been sort of like they've sort of dragged out the top 10 and gone through a bit of a highlights package and all that for the top 10. But then from picks 11 through to the end, they're gone in about 5 minutes. So you haven't really had a chance to sort of think, or, you know, if you've gone to the toilet, then you're suddenly 3 rounds in and you've missed everything. But I guess I'm a bit of a draft geek, so I don't really mind watching all the discussions that happen at the tables, and you get to hear the commentators' thoughts about the picks as they roll on. But it definitely went for too long. I mean, it went for, 2.5 hours for 70 picks. I mean, it got a bit tiresome how I thought a club would make their selection, and then it would take up to 45 seconds for the actual selection to end up being called out. And I guess if they can improve that efficiency and cut it down to 15 to 20 seconds, that would have been a better spectacle. But I guess it's not really about the viewers in the end.
I think that, there might be some efficiencies to be gained in terms of going from club wanting and then the AFL approving. But I don't know. I've got no problem with the slower pace. If you look at that 70 picks, what's that, 2 rounds of NFL draft? Effectively, and that wouldn't operate. That would be slower, if anything. Though admittedly, there are trades in that one. I think it's kind of good in a way because it means that no matter which club you support, you know that your picks are going to get a little bit of attention. Whereas in previous years, if you didn't have a top 10 pick, then there wasn't really a lot of point following live because they'd be interviewing one of the top 10 picks over when you picked a player. So I think that certainly made it. I think it has made it more watchable because it means more fans of more clubs can be a bit involved. I think there probably was a bit of a strategic mess up, though, which was unavoidable in that, obviously, with Adelaide having their 2 early picks and then not picking for ages, apparently it was a bit of a walkout after their second pick, and then they were done for the day. They were just pretty happy to go home after seeing who the first 2 rounders were, and that was it. So that's maybe not a great result for crowds in the actual event, but I guess that's why you probably hold these things in Melbourne if you're going to follow the current format. It makes a bit more sense there.
Yeah.
I thought just all the Adelaide fans fell off their seat when they read out their number 2 pick.
Huh.
Yes, they were probably all
something like
scrambling
that.
for a little guy. Sorry about that.
Perfect timing. That was wonderful. We might as well go through the picks now, the first round, and talk about them in a little bit more detail, I guess. I guess the first 3 picks went pretty much as planned. Wiedering number 1, Shaki number 2. That was always going to happen. Callum Mills was bid on by Melbourne at pick 3. He went to Sydney. That was always going to happen. Pick 4, the pre-talk or the pre-draft chatter that Clayton Oliver would go to Melbourne actually did occur. So that still baffles me, to be honest.
Why did it baffle you?
I still think it's a bit of a reach. Now, having said that, is a mid-teen pick to me. So they've taken him at pick 4. Hopefully, for their point of view, hopefully they know what they're doing. But yeah, he doesn't reek to me of a top 4 pick.
I think what you have to consider with Melbourne is, I mean, I guess they're not perfect, but also if you look at the type of midfielder he is, I think that he's someone that fits in very well with the existing midfield that Melbourne are already developing. I think that he'll be, I suppose, more. They'll be hoping that he'll turn out to be more of a power midfielder as opposed to an aggregator or a more defensive midfielder, because they've got that. They don't need that. And so I can see why they target Oliver on that basis. It wouldn't have been a bad move to go with Parrish, but I can understand why they went with Oliver of the ones that were available, and it didn't really mess them up because they still got their first choice of all the key position players at pick 9 anyway. So, I don't think they affect their strategy at all.
Yeah. Well, it's probably worked out pretty well for them. They probably got the key position forward in Wiedemann that they were after with pick 9. So they've ended up with probably 2 picks that they were hoping to get. Oliver, I mean, as I said, it still baffles me how he's gone that early when he couldn't even get involved in the championships, didn't get picked or selected in the squads at all, and he's just flown up the ladder in the last couple of months. But good on him. It'll be interesting to see how he goes. Hopefully, for Melbourne's sake, that he does turn out to be a bit of a gun, because if they've got this one wrong, they probably won't live it down for a long time.
I think that if you're a Melbourne administration, I think that Clayton Oliver not working out is probably just another drop in the ocean, really. I don't think you'd be too worried about the fallout from that, because they've had a lot of early picks that haven't really worked out, or have gone elsewhere when you really wouldn't expect them to. So I think that if he stays at Melbourne, they'll be pretty excited, even if he's just a middling player. So yeah, I think they're fine there.
Parrish and Francis to Essendon with picks 5 and 6. I mean, they got the midfielder they wanted and also a potential superstar in Francis who can play anywhere. You can't really go wrong with those 2 picks.
Just solid picking.
Yep.
Yeah, they've gone best available there, so good on them. Hopper was bid on by the Gold Coast at pick 7, so he went to GWS. I guess the first mini surprise was, Gold Coast picking Calamarchi, though he was predicted to go there in the medium Phantoms. But I can't help but feel that they could have maybe filled a bit more of a need there with a more consistent player with just as much scope for improvement. But I quite like Archie. He did have a poor year. He really struggled when trying to go through the midfield. It's just got a real sense of sort of Ashley Sampi about it for me, though.
In what respect? In that he's being drafted a bit early, or in that...
A bit early, sort of like a bit of a flighty guy that's, a lot of X factor, but maybe not a lot of substance behind him, hoping that he can turn out to be a bit of a midfielder, but may not actually get there and will only ever be a bit of a sort of flighty half-forward flanker.
I think what you need to consider is that it is Gold Coast drafting, and they've still got Scotty Clayton up there, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And his preference is very much for, and there's good reasons for this, but it's very much for players that can become exceptional in some regard. And that goes back to something we discussed on the podcast previously about how you break zones and how you break through defences, and that's through having athletes with exceptional attributes. The fact that Brendan's come on pretty well would be kind of tempting, and Gold Coast have had enough early picks that they can afford to be a little bit out there with their selections and go for talent rather than the sure thing. Whereas a club like Melbourne or Carlton, they're probably a bit more inclined to be a bit safer because they don't have those number of chances. But I kind of feel strategically, like if you're looking at whether Archie's going to stay there, I mean, I can't imagine that Callum Archie would stay at Gold Coast, would you?
No, well,
with
that's
Brendan at
another
Port,
thing.
With Brendan at Port, it's like he's got 3 home clubs he could go to. He could go back to Perth or he could go to Port Adelaide. So it's sort of adding extra bidders into every off-season that he'll get chatted up by. So I don't know. I can understand on a talent basis, but on a losing the players basis, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the go-home factor, I think, really, for interstate kids is, are they playing? If they're playing, they tend not to have the go-home factor. If they're not playing, that's when the go-home factor comes into it. So I'm a bit like Macca. It's like, I thought they had enough of his type running around that they could go for other players. But then, as you said, he's pure talent. If you're going on talent and potential, he's a good pick, but his potential didn't match his output this year. So, which one do you rule your decision by? Because you're looking for the best player in 7 years' time, not the best player next year.
For me, I mean, I would have gone Malera with that pick. I think, reasonably similar players. I think Malera's got a lot more scope for reaching his potential than what Archie does. But as I said, I do actually like Archie. I just don't really see the fit there with Gold Coast. That's why it's a little bit strange for me why they went in that direction. But
yeah, I would have thought they could have gone a toll.
Can I come up with a weird conspiracy theory? Which is basically that we've seen Gold Coast trying to get future draft picks. I'm just wondering if there's just a tricky way of doing that. You draft a player that you can offload to multiple clubs, and 1 or 2 years' time, when you think it's a better draft year or that you're more likely to need the talent, it's another way of investing in draft picks for future years, I guess, is by drafting players that you'll be able to move on if you develop them right.
It's an interesting theory, but do you really want to do that with your pick 8?
Long shot.
Maybe you do that with like pick 40 or something, but not with pick 8. Not when you haven't made finals and you're 5 years into your history. And the pressure's on. They really need to start getting some sort of success.
I just remember that's what they used as the rationale for West Coast drafting Mark Seaby back in the day when they had absolutely no need for him in the side, and obviously they traded him a few years later and they didn't lose any value. So I don't know. That was just a thought. Not much to it. Yeah,
I guess it's probably similar to Port picking 15 ruckmen in the mid sort of 2000s, and we were able to offload some of them. But anyway, moving on. Talking about Carlton, obviously they had 4 picks in the first 20 or so. They got Wiedering with pick 1. That's a great pick. They picked Harry Mackay with pick 10. They got Charlie Curnow with pick 12, and they got David Cunningham, the midfielder, with pick 23. So they went toll with their first 3 picks. And you can pretty much base your side around Mackay and Curnow up forward and Wiedering down back for the next sort of 10 years.
Well, that's certainly what they'd be hoping for them, and that's what you read into the picks. Certainly Wiedering, you just the talent. It's like he's got to be an AFL footballer for as long as his body holds up type thing. Mackay, I'm high on him, and I sit there and think if you give him the right role up forward and let him use his work up around centre forward, not pin him back in the goal square, I think he'll be a player as well.
Yep.
And if Curnow can slip in around 2 tolls and not have the pressure, I think they've got a reasonable player there too.
Yeah.
Look, their key. Yeah. Their key position stocks were pretty dire, so they've gone a long way to try and solve that issue.
Yes, yeah, and again, they had to address it. So they've tried to. If it fails, well, so be it. But at least you've made the decision.
Yeah, and it's pretty. I guess it's something we had a query about at the end of trade period, but now it's kind of a lot more obvious and more sensible. Is that when they were trading away their forward line, effectively, we're sort of saying, what are they doing? And it's become very clear they're rebuilding. That's 100% of what they're doing. And with a new coach, it makes sense to do that, and it's really the time to do it. So they've probably done about as well as they can, I think, as far as securing their future, not for next year or the year after, but at least for 4 or 5 years' time. You'd have to say they're in a good position to be building and on the rise then.
The Crows, they landed Malera, who they were hoping to get. That's a fantastic pick for them. He could be an absolute phenomenon. But then they made one of the most fascinating decisions in recent memory. They picked a player called Tom Duday, a player widely predicted to go sort of beyond the third round. And they called his name with pick 17. For me, it's one of the biggest draft surprises of all time. You know, there's always sort of players that sort of bolt up the ladder, and we've already spoken about Clayton Oliver. But generally, players sort of bolt in the predictions sort of leading up to the draft. It's very rare for a player that's picked to go in the 50s, 60s or 70s to shoot up the ladder like that on draft night itself.
Yep.
That's a weird one. I bet you if they had a chance to trade picks during the draft, they would have happily traded out of pick 17 and gone, well, we can get him at pick 28 and we'll have another pick at pick 32 or something like that and return for our pick 17. Because I think by the time they decided that, they would have had to know that nobody else was anywhere near picking that high for him.
Yeah.
But their hands were tied by not having another pick in the draft.
Well, they rushed to trade Dangerfield early on, and you would have thought that the reason they'd rushed to trade Dangerfield is so they had the maximum amount of time possible to trade off what they got for him, and they didn't do it, and they ended up in this situation. It's just bizarre. They had the whole trade week with extra draft picks around that they could do things with, and they didn't do anything. They didn't do enough with it.
Yeah.
I guess they did bid on Harrison Himmelberg, and I would assume that they were pretty confident that they would actually land him.
Yeah, but then again, I sit there and go, that's a reach too. Right. Bidding on Himmelberg that early. And I think the amount of time it took them to match the bid, there was a bit of that thought process coming from GWS too. Like, really? We weren't planning on matching this bid.
It's a bit of a strange one. I actually really like the look of him, going by his highlights package. Defensively, he looks really good. He's got great awareness, really nice skills. His skills could be better. I like his agility. But it's about their fifth back flanker they've picked up this year. I mean, that's probably the strange part for me. I mean, in the end, I guess Ogilvy's either a genius and they've picked up maybe who they might think is the next Scott Pendlebury, that sort of player, or they've picked up the next Christian Howard and he's going to play about 6 games and that'll be it.
I kind of wonder if I don't know if it's a return to Crowbot or if it's just a weird aping of the second half of last season for Port Adelaide, because it could be either of those. Like the second one, it was really obvious, you see Port Adelaide have that big resurgence last year, and it's because we had all these half-back flankers in the side, and if you're a shameless copycat that doesn't really care about systems but tries to copy what the other team's doing, then this is the sort of thing you do on a draft day, isn't it? I don't know.
I guess in the end they'll be hoping that Brodie Smith and Rory Laird move into the midfield full-time, and that leaves some spots down back to fill. So maybe he might be one of those sort of players that can fill a spot there pretty quickly. But yeah, it just seemed like one of the biggest draft surprises of all time. And I think going by the reaction of the crowd at the time, a lot of the sort of buzz was sort of like, huh? Sort of like, who the hell's that? No one really predicted that. But yeah, a bit of a strange one. But yeah, be interesting to see how he plays.
Very.
So GWS got Matthew Kennedy at pick 13. Richmond bid twice. They bid on Eric Hipwood, who went to Brisbane at pick 14. And then they picked another, I guess, a mini surprise with Daniel Rioli at 15, and another player that sort of shot up the ladder a little bit in recent times.
Yeah. I don't think we discussed him last week.
That type of player doesn't surprise me. As I said last week, I reckon Archie will go to Richmond because it was just the sort of player they're craving for, and there was a bit of hype about when you took him off the board. Rioli's that sort of player their list is craving for somebody like that. So
yeah,
it's almost...
It definitely fills a hole for them.
Yeah. We want somebody, give the first two that we would have loved to have already gone. So Malera and Archie have gone, well, we'll back talent in. We'll back his highlight reels in.
Pick 18 was St Kilda. Mish, I want your opinion on this. Jade Gresham, your favourite player, went in the first round.
Top end of where he should be going. I think he's very vanilla mid type thing. It's probably one where you indicate that it's no depth in the draft. As far as top end depth, you're starting to get through your depth. And they've just gone for a mid dare I say, he's a Melksham type pick. Like,
Yep.
Or who's the guy that got traded to Brisbane from North Melbourne? From Essendon. Who's North Melbourne mid? I can't remember.
Bastonet.
Yeah. Just those sorts of kids. Like, you just sort of sit there and go, oh, they're solid. There's nothing exciting about them. But yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of felt like that was a theme of St Kilda's draft, is they seem to draft players that were just sort of nothing exciting about them, as far as I could see. Like, kind of generic players. I don't know what they got. I don't know what their aim was on draft day, but I wouldn't rate them all that highly in terms of, hitting players that I think are going to be amazing. I don't know.
Yeah. That's true. Moving on, the next team was Hawthorn, and they took a couple of punts with their two picks. Ryan Burton goes to Waverley at pick 19. Could be one of the players of the draft if he can recover effectively from his leg injury. We spoke about him at length in the preview. And Kieran Lovell, a player that we sort of talked about for going at one of Port's picks, is another interesting one. You can't deny his talent. He's got, he's pretty good physically despite his 173 centimetre stature. He's a natural bowl winner. Picked up obscene amounts of the bowl at the championships and throughout the year. But some thought he may not even get drafted at all due to his size. And here he is going to Hawthorn at pick 22.
It's surprising.
It's just very early for him.
Yep.
Again, we commented about them needing to address their midfield issues, but I sit there and go like that, compare him to Snelling and go, is there really 60 picks difference between those two players?
Do you think?
Right.
Oh, no.
I think it's a big step from what Lovell's playing to AFL. Right. But the one thing he has got on Snelling is he can kick.
Do you think there's anything in Hawthorn rating them highly because he's Tasmanian and they might have a bit more inside knowledge of the Tasmanian players than other clubs do?
I don't think so. If you were talking about pick 60, I could sit there and go, yeah, there is this. Yeah. Oh, is this kid or that kid? This one's from Tassie. It'd be a nice little story. It was not much difference. Okay, let's go that way. But when you're talking that point in the draft, you are still looking at the best talent. You're not trying to be cute at all. Like, you're either looking for position needs because you're desperate, or you're just looking at the best available that suits your club. I think Tassie is a nice little benefit for them because it helps with their Tassie exposure and all that sort of stuff. But they're not going to just pick someone from Tassie.
No, I didn't mean that was being the reason, but I mean that because they are in Tasmania, they would have opened up more information in regards to local talent. I imagine the local clubs would be more willing to tell Hawthorn what the inside scoop is on every junior from year dot till now than any other round club. Same as having a local advantage. I don't know.
Every club other than Central Districts is happy to tell you about every kid on their list and pump them up.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yep. I can't say this is the truth, but it wouldn't surprise me if out north they hear all the scouts are starting to get into someone and they then just play them out of position and make them have a couple of quiet games for everybody to go quiet on them. It was almost uncanny how that used to happen. And it's just like, because they produce too much talent not to get kids drafted. Right.
Yeah. True.
I
don't know. Maybe Hawthorn just like his ball winning ability, because he's a natural ball winner. He averaged something like 30 touches in the championship. Maybe they like that about him. So it's an interesting one.
I mean, I guess when you frame those two picks with Burton and Lovell, I mean, they're just real shots, aren't they? Like, they're just huge punts. And I guess if any team in the league is confident in taking that sort of punt, it would have to be Hawthorn, because they don't. We talk about how they need midfields for the future, but they don't need them right now. So if they think the upside's potentially high enough, then they're probably less exposed at taking a risk that doesn't work out than pretty much any other club out there.
Yeah.
So certainly Ryan Burton makes sense in that perspective. And I don't know if Kieran Lovell does, but maybe he does. I don't know.
If you happen with Burton's medical, though, he's no pump. He's an absolute bargain at that pick, if you're happy with his medical.
Well, it's the medical, isn't it?
And again, they made him do a medical. Didn't he have a medical just a couple of days before the draft?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, that was the talk pre-draft, was that Hawthorn was super keen on him and they landed him, so I'm sure they're stoked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on, North Melbourne, I think they did absolutely stunningly well. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Ben Mackay, but he could become a pretty decent player. But to land Ryan Clark at pick 31 and also get Mitch Hibberd at pick 33, I mean, that's just revitalised their midfield straight away. I rate Clark and Hibberd very, very highly. I think they've done super well out of this draft.
Yep. Except I'm going to say, Hibberd, when they overlooked somebody who ended up at Port Adelaides, I just find that amazing. All right. North Melbourne, some outside polish to go with all their mids that they've got. Jibs, that would have been handy for them. Not knocking Hibberd, but I just think somebody's a class above.
Okay. I've got to say, I'm really disappointed that Ryan Clark ended up at North Melbourne, because that seems like it's, in terms of his style and his character, it seems like it's a perfect fit. I don't know, he could be one of those players that we just love to hate for the next 10 years, really. That was kind of matchup is perfect. He's a perfect North Melbourne player. It's astounding.
Yeah. I think you're right, Big. Clark is the type of player I do absolutely hate, because I'll watch him play footy and he'll get 30 possessions a game, and I'll look at him every week and go, you're an average footballer on talent. But you're actually a good AFL footballer, and that frustrates me when they play for other teams.
Yeah, that's the North Melbourne thing, isn't it?
Look, there was some good value on face value. There was some really good value midway through the draft. Collins fell to pick 26 for the Dogs. That's a good pick for them. Tucker to 27 at Freo. He went a bit later than expected. Clark at 31, Hibberd at 33. Tommy Cole at 36. He went to West Coast. Reece Matheson, he fell a long way. He went to pick 39. To go from someone that was rated as a top 10 pick to end up going at 39 was pretty interesting as well. Harley Ballock, another one that was highly spoken of. He went to Freo at pick 38. So on face value, there was a lot of value around that sort of stage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it ties into sort of what Mish was talking about last week, was that there was not a lot of consensus on the players. So it wasn't that it was a weak draft, but just that not everyone agreed on who was valued where. And I think that mixing up in the order, I mean, there was quite a bit of mixing up in the order. I guess that kind of reflects that.
Yes. Like an ordinary draft, you can get good players inside top 40. They seem to always slide through. Like other clubs have 10 players that they like, and all of a sudden you sit there and go, pick 28, so all of a sudden they're at pick 38. And it looks like an absolute bargain from your own point of view. It's like Hawthorn would say that they think they've got a bargain with Lovell. Right?
Yeah.
It's just how you rate them. You think you're getting bargains down that side of the draft. And then once you get past there, you then start getting to the players that you start not having confidence with. So you're not overexcited. But this group through pick 25 to 40, you quite often get surprised as to who you've been able to pick up off of your own preferred list.
All right, well, let's look at Port's picks now. Our first pick 32, moved back to pick 37 with the academy selections. Look, I described this player in our preview as my favourite player in this draft pool. I picked to go first round, and hopefully we'd be able to snag him back in a few years' time. Well, there's no need. We picked Riley Bonner with pick 37, and I tell you what, you could hear me screaming from China, I reckon. I was that bloody excited.
Yes, how is Kylie?
She was in Adelaide, so it was all right.
Yes.
No.
Oh, stoked. You can't expect to pick a player up like that at that pick. It's like you feel like you've done robbery, like the Crows' former recruiting manager always says.
Yeah, I think that look, it's fantastic pickup, and I guess that we are kind of in a position to some extent now that we picked up Charlie Dixon to sort of pick best available, and I certainly think that's exactly what we did. It is a shame that he's probably a halfback flanker, but I guess that's a couple of years away that he'll actually be a regular in the side, probably. I don't know. Do you reckon he can be a quick starter, Mish, or do you think he'll have a bit of development time?
I think he's more a wingman. Like, I hear of everybody talking about being a halfback. I reckon you want him up on the wing. You want him getting the ball in transition because you want him kicking the ball inside 50.
Yeah.
If he's kicking the ball inside 50 for you, it opens up so many options because if he's carrying the ball and can go left or right, the forwards can lead wherever they want. And he's got that penetration whereby your defenders automatically work on players can kick 50 metres. It's just their subconscious. And when you get a player who can all of a sudden kick 60, the forward kicks to it that fraction of a second earlier and the defender gets caught out of position. And the same thing, if the defender's thinking he's left-footed coming down the field and you lead to the right, you've beaten your defender just because he's just not used to the player. It's like when Mitchell gets the ball for Hawthorn. All they do, the defenders are normally running to the normal spot, and all Hawthorn are doing is leading up for the short kick in every angle when Mitchell finds one. Right. So, yeah, by the time you play with them, I just sit there and go, you just got to work on his ability to get the ball and his ability to get it more often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's 190 centimetres. He's 85 kilos, so he's a really good size. He plays, as we've said, he's played predominantly down back as a creative defender. He's drawn a lot of comparisons to guys like Grant Birchall and our own Jasper Pittard as well. Widely considered the best kick in this draft pool. I had him very high up in my talent list. I thought he was top 10. I reckon he's an absolute gun. Anyone with those sort of foot skills, who's got decent pace, good spatial awareness, excellent vision, and ability to take the game on, is worth a lot in the modern game, in my opinion.
I think that, I do like the idea of him being a wingman, and I guess probably, obviously the fact that he played there, but part of the reason why people are thinking of him as a halfback, including myself, is just that concept we all have in our mind now of sort of like the quarterbacking halfback flanker, and I can certainly see that, if he can transfer that ability to pick out targets, which I think is probably the strength I've seen, if he can carry that forward and actually bring it up the field. Obviously we'll have to play a forward line to actually exploit it, but that is a pretty tempting thing to imagine, picking out Dixon on the lead or even, bombing long to John Butcher, who might get a bit of an advantage with that 60-metre kick you're talking about. It'd be nice to see.
Well, it's interesting that the Westies footy manager reckons he's got a thing going as a lead-up forward. He reckons he'd be a better player as a lead-up forward. So, that could be an option as well.
I think he'd lose that ability to really spot up targets to some extent. I don't know. You
reckon if he's playing the old Chad Corns role, up sort of half-forward flank on a wing, that sort of area?
If he's playing that, but if he's playing a Monfries role, then I think he'd lose it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Again, that lead-up forward role or as I sit there and say, the link between the backs and the forward lines. It's a pretty similar role. It's just whether you're leading from the forward line up to that position or whether you're running out of defence to that position. It depends what suits your game plan. And I would assume the way Port play, it's more likely to be somebody running out of defence to that position rather than somebody leading up into that position. Because they tend to leave Schultz at centre forward, and Schultz can then run back into the space that these guys have created by running forward onto the football rather than Schultz leading up at the ball.
Well, I guess the question I've got is, he's the best kick in the draft. He's a great size, good pace, great vision. He's got all these attributes. Why did he fall to pick 37? What is it about his game that recruiters weren't keen on?
I would say, if you're going to knock him, it's contested footy and it's high numbers of footy. He doesn't get high. He's not, 30 possession player at the moment. He's not your big pack impact player. Is outside use the football. Now, outside use the ball 15 times isn't overly exciting. Outside get the ball 25 times and use it is exciting.
Yeah. He did average 23 touches a game in the under-18s the SANFL under-18s. He averaged 18 touches a game in the championships and 18 touches a game in the reserves as well. So he gets it enough. If he could get it another 4 or 5 times, I'd be pretty stoked.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. And that's probably the difference between going, what I would say, around pick 20 and going top 10. Is that extra 5 possessions a game, all of a sudden you have that extra impact on a game of footy. It's hard to teach kids to increase their possession rate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess part of it comes down to system play, doesn't it? Like, if they can learn the system better and the team is using them effectively, then that could probably bump it up.
Yeah.
I don't know how steady his teams that he was playing in at junior level were. Obviously, inside players are more in a position to just go in and get it. But if you are sort of a little bit outside or receiving or whatever else, then obviously you're going to be a bit dependent on other people around you. Yep. It could be part of that.
But also at that level, if you run into the right places, they'll look for you because they know you could. So they'll trust you. So they'll feed you the footy. So again, I haven't watched his games live to see how his running position is, but I would say that would be the one slow he's got on him. Now, that can be a minor tweak. It can be a fitness tweak. Because 18 possessions a week in reserves is not a bad output. It's just not grabbing a game by the throat.
So where do we see him fitting in 2016? For me, I think, as you mentioned, Portia, I think he's probably a year or two away from getting sort of consistent, regular AFL footy.
I think it probably comes down to injury.
If he does the right thing...
Yeah. Finish.
Okay. If he does the right thing, I think they'll feed him half a dozen games. If he's coming along, they'll feed him half a dozen games just to get experience in him and freshness into the list and all that sort of stuff. Dare I say, if he can force his way into the best 22 this year, we are not travelling as well as what we should be.
Yeah, I kind of think that it's going to depend on how the club tries to shape him in terms of his development. If they try and build him up as a half-back flanker, then I don't think he'll get a game this year. If they do go for that wing half-forward role, and we have similar unfortunate value as far as injuries to Polak and White and maybe Monfries, then there might be a bit more of an opportunity for him to get a game. But I think if he's brought up as a half-back flanker, I don't think he's got much show.
Yep. All right, moving on, talking about our second pick. Another player that we spoke about at length in the podcast. Second pick was, or moved up slightly to pick 45 with the Academy picks as well. So we drafted Aidan Johnson, who's 184 centimetres. He's a wing/half-forward flanker. Played just the one match for the year after a quad injury ruined his season. He's another sort of super athletic, very quick, good defensive pressure, hard tackler. He's got X factor. He's a goal kicker. His highlights in his highlight package are predominantly as him as a 16-year-old, and they do look very good.
Yes. Yep. Again, he's one of those. If he'd played a season of footy and showed high possession rates, he'd be right at that pointy end of the draft. You look at, he's got an injury issue. He hasn't played all year. Last year's figures is as though he showed glimpses last year at TAC. The figures aren't going, oh wow, Jibs, this guy's great. But then again, he's playing for a pretty average team last year too. So there's a bit of faith in his talent.
Yeah,
and I think the talent deserves a bit of faith. And at that pick, you just can't help but be happy with picking up a player with that talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a marked difference between Bonner and Johnson as far as their potential to, or likelihood, I should say, not potential, but their likelihood to play AFL football. I think it's a bigger gap than 8 picks, really. But he's this player type that we can use. And if he develops well, if he works hard, then he'd have to be a really good shot. It's nice that he's a Port Adelaide fan as well. That's always a good thing. And of course, that distinction that he was actually the first AFL player on Port's list born after we entered the AFL, which is nice to think. No one else has got any memories of Fitzroy.
That just means we're getting old. That's all that means.
Yeah, that's all right though. It happens.
True. Very true. Well, look, I mean, his athletic package is very tempting. I mean, he did a 2.97 20-metre sprint, which was in the top 25%. I was in the top 4% for agility, top 20% in repeat sprints, and also did a 14.4 beep test, which is very, very good. So he ticks all the boxes athletically.
Yeah. Talent-wise, he's got the potential to be a Peter Burgoyne. That's not saying he will be, but he's got that talent set of the amount of getting out of traffic, break lines, be able to do a bit up forward. He's got that talent, but whether he can actually transpose that talent into actually being an AFL footballer who can do it under pressure, that's going to be up to the kid first to get his body right, and then just prove that he can do it to himself.
Yeah. So I guess the same question, where do we see him fitting in 2016 and beyond?
Magpies. It was 2 years, I'd say. Maybe you'll get a game in the third year if we decide he's developed well.
Yeah, next year I think he's just develop him physically. Get him happy in his body, feeling sound that his legs are okay. Get them right. And then release him the following year.
Yep.
See how he goes.
Yeah. Oh, look, unless he really, really impresses and is just that good, I can't really see him getting a game next year. I think 2017 and beyond is when I'll be looking at getting him a lot more game time, and possibly taking over from Whitey in that sort of role.
Maybe.
Yeah, or
I
Jake
think
Need.
it'll be longer than that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Jake Need, I like that call. Could happen.
Could happen.
It's good to have options as well. So
Yes, yep.
he certainly adds to that.
Hmm.
So that was it for our national draft. Just the two picks. Sammy Gray was upgraded to the senior list, so we've gone into 2016 with a spare spot on the senior list, meaning we can have a nominated rookie that can play from round one. So 70 picks in the national draft wasn't as low as what some were predicting. Some were predicting in the 50s. I think 2013 was lower as well. So maybe the draft pool wasn't as bad as what some were talking about.
I agree. It wasn't as bad. The closer it got to draft time, the more it looked like an average draft. Not an exciting draft, but yeah. But dare I say, once you got past pick 50, it was throw dart at the dartboard type stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It is really, I can't see how the clubs would have any confidence in the kids they picked past there. It was just, yeah, it's like, oh my God, you're calling out names and you're giving them a shot, but geez, they've got a lot of work to do. And good luck to them. Because it's one hell of an achievement to get onto an AFL list from a kid's point of view.
Oh, yeah.
So, talking about the rookie draft, there were plenty of players that we had discussed in the preview that were still available in the rookie draft, and we ended up picking two of the ones that we spoke about in some sort of length. The first pick in the rookie draft that we chose was pick 10. We chose Will Snelling from West Adelaide, 173 centimetre, 77 kilo midfielder. Very good on the inside, but can also find space and get it on the outside as well. Athletically, he's got the goods. He did a 2.95 20-metre sprint, so was in the top 15%. Did an 8.24 second in the agility test, so was top 10. Was top 10 in the repeat sprint as well. Did a 14.10 beat test, so very, very good there. And a 10-minute, 10-second into 3K, so was also in the top 11%. So once again, just like Johnson, athletically, he's got the package. And you watch him play, and he can certainly play football as well. He reads the play exceptionally well. Is able to get in and under and win the contested ball, and dish off a really good handball as well. His kicking efficiency is very good. He does hit targets. I guess the main issue with his actual skills is the fact that his kick does sort of top out at about 40 metres.
I'm pretty pleased with this pick for a rookie pick. I think that's exactly when you draft players of this height, and I think that he's as well developed at his age as you could possibly hope him to be. Obviously, the upside, it's hard to see where it will necessarily be, but he'll probably get a good shot, I'd imagine. I don't know if he'll play real games in 2016, but he might get a couple of NAB challenges. If he has a good pre-season, that might well be on the cards, and then we'll get a bit more of an idea of how his skill and his ability might translate to AFL level. But obviously, he's still an 18-year-old and he's got development to do. He might have the body, but he's still got to learn how the game's played and learn his team structures and all that sort of fun stuff as well. So, but look, his pedigree's pretty awesome. If he was 10 centimetres taller and he had a kick, he'd be really right up there. So it's all on him now. Got a lot of work to do.
That's good. The kid deserves a shot. It's funny, you read what Parker said. It's like his coaches rate him. He's performed. He deserves a shot. It's almost as if it's like the kid's done everything right. I'm actually not 100% convinced myself, but he's done enough to actually get a shot at footy. Now it's up to him to prove that I'm wrong and he's right.
I think seeing the success of Sam Gray in the back half of the year, who's also around about that sort of height range, has maybe sort of opened the doors for someone like Will Snelling and guys like Kieran Lovell as well. But look, I mean, that's the only thing really holding him back from becoming successful, I think, is the fact that he's 173 centimetres. I mean, he can play footy. He averaged 21 touches at the championships, averaged 19 touches at senior SANFL level throughout the year, averaged over 20 touches a game in the final series, had a ripping grand final as well. So he's done it on the big stage, and he's done it at senior level. So that's certainly something that's a big tick in his box, I think.
Yep. I think more to hold him back is his kicking penetration, which just everyone's going to keep going on about that. But he also just needs to be a bit tidier around the packs with his handballs. Right. Not a bad handball, just every now and then he seems to make one where he's not quite concentrated enough and just turns the ball over through lack of execution more than lack of talent. But that's experience, right? That's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 24-year-old on your list.
As you said, Portia, I reckon he's the perfect rookie pick. I really like it. And look, I mean, he's the sort of player that I could definitely see coming in and actually getting games throughout the year.
Yeah, it'll come down to, what the team needs are at any given time. Obviously, we've got that free spot we can do a bit of messing around, and if all of our halfback flankers are fine, then it probably won't be Cracker. So he might well get a shot. But you'd have to think that unless he has an amazing pre-season, if we were looking for a small midfielder off our rookie list, we'd probably still be going for Kane Mitchell rather than Will Snelling, unless he does something impressive.
Yep. That's it. All right, the second...
I'd probably be the other way around. I'd probably play Snelling in the hope that he becomes a good footballer. And I think if you're playing Mitchell, it means that somebody like Snelling's not actually standing up.
I think it comes down to where the team is in terms of what they need and where we are on the ladder. Like, if we're mid-table again, then, yeah, obviously second half of the year you're probably thinking, well, we'll invest a bit in Snelling. But if it's sort of like you're trying to grind out every last little bit of a win because we're having a lot of close games or whatever else, and I think you kind of would favour that experience of Kane Mitchell over Will Snelling if you did need to bring one of them in. I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't... If it's really hot, like at any stage of the year, like we're maybe, still fighting for top position or whatever else, I think you'd probably still lean towards him, lean towards Mitchell over Snelling pretty much just because he's been there, he's shown he can perform in an AFL side when it's an important game, not just in crap games, and just that little iffiness in relation to obviously Snelling coming in and playing his first game. I don't know. It depends on rotations. I suppose we've got the sub rule gone, so it might limit his ability to play as well. Well, both of them, really.
It'll be interesting. Grand final, if we're picking team for grand final, yeah, I'd pick Mitchell over Snelling. If we're picking for team for round 15, and we're looking like having to have a midfielder come in for 1 week.
Yeah.
Unless we're 8 and 7, or something like that, and we're desperate for a win, I'd rather play Snelling and give him the exposure to AFL.
I mean, if we're a game clear on top, then yeah, pick Snelling every time. But if we're right in the mix or we're fighting for top four, then you don't want to mess around when there's such an obvious choice of a slightly more experienced player that can just contribute that little bit more right now.
Yep.
All right, that's it. All right, second pick was pick 28, and we chose another player that we did speak about in the preview. We chose Cameron Hewitt of North Adelaide. He's a 188cm midfield utility, likes playing inside, but can also play across half forward or in defence as well. He reminds me a lot of Aaron Young in that department. He seems deceptively tall, quite wiry. For me, the other three players that we've spoken about so far have been very athletic. For me, Hewitt is one that Burjo needs to put in a lot of work on, for me. He did a 3.14 20-metre sprint, so was the fourth slowest midfielder tested. Was bottom 11% in the repeat sprints, did a 13.1 beat test, so was in the bottom 15%, and was also in the bottom 30% in the 3 kilometre time trial as well. So he's got a bit to work on physically, but there's actual parts of his football that do seem to have a lot of ability. And does have a reasonable amount to work with.
I think you're right in terms of Burgess, and I think he's definitely one of those guys where if his fitness is not absolutely up to scratch at the end of the first year, he'll probably be cut, for sure, I would imagine. Because that's going to be the big query. But I've got to say, I'm not super excited about this pick, and I've had a bit of a whinge on draft day, but if I'm looking at who went after him, I'm not really convinced that anyone else should have been picked at that pick, so... we'll see. Very speculative, but it's all on him.
Yeah, well, what did I say last week? I don't think he's an AFL talent, so it doesn't thrill me. But as Portia said, it's like really, of those that got picked after him, who do you sit there and go, oh, jeez, I wish we got him instead? And it's just not that. It's like, I sit there more along the lines of, geez, I would have rather Tahana, but there's obviously a reason why Tahana's got overlooked by everyone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, look, I think Tahana's draft combine was pretty poor. He really struggled there, and he's a player that doesn't really get much of the ball. He's only sort of a 12 to 14 disposal a game player, so that's probably a reason why he's pretty much struggled, I think, to get picked, even though I would have liked him as well. He was one of my favourite players going in. But he's probably a player that, if he plays really well this year, then he'll probably get another chance.
Yep.
But back on Hewitt, I mean, for me, his clearance work looks pretty good. He's got a real thirst for the contest and he's clever at finding space. For a right footer, I think he's got a really neat left foot as well, which is important. And he's got decent reach for his height as well. Seems to have long arms. I can personally see him getting 2 years on the rookie list. I think he's got a lot to work on, but I think there's a core of a decent footballer there. And look, statistically, he didn't really play many games this year. I think he only played about 6 games. He averaged 19 touches in the championships. He averaged 21 touches at under 18 level, and he played 1 reserves game where he got 23 touches at 82%, which is pretty decent.
Yeah. So again, a kid like that gets a chance to prove that he can progress. If he progresses, they'll keep him. If he stagnates, he'll be gone. And that's the joy of 1-year contracts on the rookie list rather than drafting some kids, is you get to see whether they improve.
Yeah, true.
Right, that's right. All right, third pick is Dan Houston, 186 centimetre mid-sized forward. Reminds me a lot of Mark Lacroix, or maybe a little bit of Jason Porplesia in there as well. He's a strong lead, a strong mark, looks to have a really nice kick for goal. He's a player I didn't really pay much attention to pre-draft. But for me, I just want to see more of him as a player. His highlights package does look pretty decent, but it is also very one-dimensional. I want to see what he does off the ball. I want to see how hard he works. I want to see his leading patterns. Does he repeat lead? What's his defensive pressure like? Can he actually play through the midfield? What's his tackling like? All those sort of questions that I've got about him are unanswered at this point in time.
I'd agree 100% with that.
Yep. Yeah. I sit there and go, mate, you're that high. I love that you can lead and you can jump and you've got that part to your game. But that's going to that's the thing that should be a bonus to your game, not your staple. So you need to become a midfielder who can go forward and do that, rather than be a forward who, from what little we see, shows no ability to actually be a midfielder.
Yeah.
So now whether Port's seen him play in one game up the field where he's actually done something properly, you get there and go, well, yeah. Because Robbie Gray in his under-18 year, he really only played one game in the midfield, where he averaged 18 possessions or something like that as a full forward of going for everywhere else. He had one game in midfield where he got 35 touches, and you could see what he could do in the midfield. So sometimes you just, by circumstance, like Robbie Gray was injured and carried an injury all year, so he didn't play mid. So whether this kid can actually has shown a glimpse of being able to play in the midfield, which I hope he has. Because, otherwise he's just a amateur footballer who dominates at that level. But at Sanford or AFL level, they just don't survive.
Yeah. Well, look, if that's all he's got to his game is the lead mark goal sort of thing, I think he'll be one and done in terms of the amount of time that he spends on the list. But look, hopefully he does have something else. Hopefully the club has seen some other sort of footage of him, which does show that he does have good defensive pressure. He can play through the midfield, can win the ball. It's stated in the draft guide that Oakley did throw him through the midfield throughout the year, and he did very well there for some amount of time. So whether he does have that potential would be good to know and good to see.
Yeah, and normally you don't get to captain your club if all you are is a lead mark, undersized footballer.
Yeah. Well, look, and he had a really good year as a 16-year-old as well. Last year he had a very, very good year and was very highly thought of. So I think he's definitely got a lot of talent. I think his one trick at the moment is a very good one. Certainly if he's got that sort of ability to leap high and take good marks, kick goals, and if he can do that at SANFL level and later on at AFL level, that'd be a bonus. But yeah, just want to see more. I want more. And then the fourth pick 57, we redrafted people's favourite, Kane Mitchell.
Well, that was a given.
Yes.
Basically, you've gone up to Kane and gone, we're going to delist you, we're going to rookie you so that we can actually get a higher pick in the draft rather than a pick at the end of the rookie draft. So, yeah, it's just a done practice these days for somebody who's very on the edge of the list. Is that, you still get your chance to play on and you have a good year, you'll get to stick around again. But, yeah, you're at that crossroads of your career and everybody knows it.
Oh, look, at least Kane Mitchell has proven that he can play decent AFL footy. That's one thing that he's got. And he can play decent AFL footy against very, very good opposition. All his best, as we've spoken about on the podcast before, all his best games have been against sort of top 4 or top 6 opposition or in showdowns. So that's a big tick in his box for me as well. Needs to improve his kicking, but look, I mean, he's there for depth. He's the perfect sort of depth player. If he comes in and plays sort of 3 or 4 games, it's not going to be an issue. If he ends up playing sort of 20 games, then it might be a bit of an issue, I think. So overall, what do you think of our draft in 2015? How did we go?
I think it's one of the better drafts we've had.
Yeah, I mean, as far as...
For what picks we had, it's just we've nailed the draft, I think.
Yeah, I think as far as addressing needs, well, I mean, the fact that we managed to land Dixon in trade period suddenly meant that our needs than they have been in any year for a long time. And so that gave us a bit of a luxury to just say, hey, there's Bonner. Fantastic. We don't really need him, but how can we pass him over? And we didn't have to. We just picked the player. So that paid off well. We didn't have an amazing picks, but I think we drafted well. I think we drafted as well as any other club. Realistically, I think if you were rating us against the other clubs in terms of what we got for the picks we had, we'd have to be, I'd say we'd be top 8, wouldn't we? At least top 8, comfortably.
Yeah.
yeah, so I think we did all right just in terms of pure value. And yeah, it's a bit of a tick at this stage, but I guess we'll see if there's any. Well, I don't know. I mean, even if only Riley Bonner of this draft turns out okay, then again, considering the picks that we had, then you can't really complain about that. That's probably about what you'd expect. That'd be an average result.
Yep. And getting Bonner where we have, basically, it means you've paid nothing for Tumpus.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
Tumpus has basically been a free swing at a player. We've basically given up nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very happy as well. Look, if Bonner comes good, if one of those other players like Johnson or Hewitt or Snelling becomes an AFL player, we've done exceptionally well. When you throw in Dixon into the mix, and look, I mean, the key for me is really Tumpus. If Tumpus can find some of that ability that he had in the underages, I mean, we've absolutely nailed this off-season.
Yep.
So, final thoughts for 2015?
Again, excitement for next year. It's like last year. Hopefully next year won't be as disappointing. But going into next year with expectations of being able to be there on grand final day. Makes some a very long time.
Oh gosh. Well, it was obviously a bit of a disappointing year, I think, in terms of our final result. But I think that we're coming out of it with a much stronger side. It kind of reminds me of probably Brisbane Lions. Right after the merger when they had a really shit year, and they were just sort of all getting their stuff together, and they obviously had a lot of things going on. But their list was getting better, even though they had a shit year. And I think that's definitely what we've done. Like our defence right now, I'm really, really confident is a premiership defence. And of course, adding potentially, depending on how they play, but adding potentially Tumpus and Bonner to what we already had, that's pretty nice. We got the power forward in the off-season for Charlie Dixon, that was a huge problem for us during the year. And we've kept on John Butcher, which I'm a bit iffy about still. But, we've got a little bit of depth at key position now, which is fantastic. So if you look at it, it's probably, as Paul Keating would say, it was the recession we had to have. I think that really it was just a good year for us to get everything together, face up to a lot of the, I suppose, bullshit that we had been thinking about ourselves in previous years. And hopefully that puts the club on a really strong footing to work really hard in this off-season and have the right focus going into next year. I know that Ken Hinkley's gone out and said it's his fault, but and apparently that's real talk, but I don't think that's real talk. I think that's just him being the captain effectively, and just, whatever happens is on him. And I think he might be protecting a few players or coaches in that statement that he made a week ago. But yeah, I think that as a club, there's a really great chance for us to come in next year and be a genuine contender, like not just thinking hopefully top four, but I think we should be in contention for the premiership in 2016, which would be great.
Absolutely. I hope we use this year as motivation. We had the chance this year, we couldn't get it done. Let's make sure we don't make the same mistake twice. In 2016, we've got a great squad, we've got a great draw. The premiership's there for the taking. Let's go at it hard. That's all I've got to say.
It's almost like a less painful version of 2002 and 2003. In that we've had those 2 years where we sort of thought we could make it, but rather than actually getting super, super high up and getting smashed in finals, we really let ourselves down during the year and then did okay in finals, realistically. So, yeah, it's probably, psychologically, it's probably a little bit of a better position to be coming into. We'll see.
Oh, that's it. Well, that's the podcast done for another year. I've got to give a big shout out to all our listeners who tuned in and supported us throughout the year on Port Fan Radio, who interacted with us live on Twitter or gave us a call. We really appreciate all the support that we got and do get. And a massive, massive thanks to Rick for setting up this system and putting his hands in his pockets and paying for the whole thing. Massive kudos.
I was going to say thanks to New Vision.
Thanks, sponsor. That's great. Massive thanks to all the guests we've had on throughout the year, whether that's those from the club or those from Big Footy. It's been a real buzz chatting to you all again in 2015. And to Rick and also Portia, a massive thank you for all the time and effort you've put in to make this podcast what it is.
I reckon that my effort would be less than half of what yours was, Macca, but thank you very much. And thank you, Macca, because no one says thank you, Macca. So thank you, Macca, you've been fantastic. When your co-hosts and guests get off track, you're very good at keeping us on track, so well done, and it's going to be great going into next year. Hopefully we'll lift our game as well as the club.
Yes, no doubt. It's going to be a big year in 2016. We'll be back, hopefully better than ever, and hopefully Rick shows his face sometimes as well. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, he'll be fun until the financial year, you'd hope.
Stop making billions, Rick, and come and join us on this piddly podcast. That'd be great.
Excellent.
That's a good end. On that note,
Okay.
can't pair.
Or
The heat's on in the kitchen. Oh, look at this. Play it simple. Good attack from Galapati Carlisle. He left his man. He took them on. He gets to lines. Oh, baby! The finest of lines.